And Japan has such a rich tradition of folklore. They have more monsters and folk stories. That little country has more stuff like that than all of Europe, all the countries of Europe combined. And they're also called bakemono or bakemono. Or bakemono would translate strictly literally as ghostly things. And these include magic animals and animated teapots and kettles and shoes, and as well as the big monsters like the ogres and things. And I'm going to talk a little bit about them, do some drawings, and if you have any questions or something to add, please, just raise your hand and speak up. But the entire country of Japan started off with the gods. Their official creation story is that Japan was created by the gods, Izunuma and Inazuma. What they did is dip their spear into the waters, and when they lifted it up, drops from the spear dripped down and formed the Japanese islands. And that is how Japan was born. And so Japan started with folklore, with the magics and the gods. I'm just going to talk about a few things about the few characters from folklore. And the interest in Japanese folklore, written folklore, was actually started not by the Japanese, but the writings were started off by a Westerner named Lafcadio Han. Is that how you pronounce it, Lafcadio? Anyway, Lafcadio Hearn. He was a journalist from England, and he collected these stories about the Japanese mythologies. He wrote them in Japanese. His wife is Japanese, and it was translated into English. But when it was retranslated into Japanese, suddenly it was discovered by the Japanese saying, "Hey, this is wonderful. We have all these stories that we just took it for granted." And that's when people started collecting them. And this is in the early 20th century, late 19th century, early 20th century. And that's when people actually started collecting these stories about the Japanese mythologies, things like the Urashima Taro or Momotaro, all those famous Japanese folklore. But let's go through some of these things. One of the most famous of the Japanese creatures are the kappa. And they're kind of like, I'm just going to do real rough things. They're like turtle people. I'll explain what this is later. Basically, the kappa are vampires, water vampires. They live in the water. And when a passerby comes by, he might ask to play, the kappa would say, "Come along and play a game of finger pull with me." Do that, the kappa would be in the water, and the person would be on the land, and if the kappa is able to pull the person in the land, that kappa would then devour him through the anus. That's the butt. And that's why a lot of people say when people are drowned, their the bottoms there become a little puckered, and they say he was got eaten by a kappa. But the way to satisfy a kappa is with cucumbers. That's a cucumber. That is a cucumber. You throw cucumbers in the water, and then the kappa will be satisfied and he will not eat anyone. Also, do people like sushi? Yes. There is a sushi called kappamaki. It's cucumbers rolled in rice, and usually with the nori, the seaweed on the outside. And that is why it's called kappamaki, because the kappa loves cucumbers so much. Also, in this little flat part here, it's not really flat, it's indented. It's like a little bowl on the top of his head. If the water from his head drains out, the kappa loses his powers. And one of his powers is that kappa is a healer. He's like a doctor. He can heal bones, he can heal cuts, he can heal almost anything. So one great legend is that if you want to conquer or fight a kappa, the first thing you do is bow, because kappa are very polite creatures. If you bow to them, they will bow back, and so the water from their heads would fall out, and you have won, and they would grant you a wish. And usually, the legends have said that many great doctors in Japanese history got their skill because they defeated a kappa. So anyway, this is probably one of the most famous of all the Japanese creatures, the kappa. Another is the let's see. Oh, you will love this one. You will love this one.
I'll do with that.
The tanuki. Yes, the tanuki, yes. I'll do it right there. And let's okay. And here's there's a Sakai bottle here. And he has a little straw hat that he wears behind him. But he has this enormous The tanuki is a trickster animal. Actually, the tanuki, there is an animal called the tanuki in Japan. It looks like a raccoon, but it's actually a type of dog. It's canine, but they call it the Japanese a raccoon dog. And he's able to transform himself. He can change shapes. He can change into a teapot. He can change into a woman. He can change into anything. And one thing about the tanuki is that he loves to drink. So that's why he carries bottles of sake. Also, too, many restaurants and bars especially have a tanuki outside of their doorway, the entryway. One, because the tanuki loves to drink. Also, to his testicles here, he also uses it on his drum. So once in a while, when you're going through the forest, you can hear something drumming. And then people say, oh, that's a tanuki in the woods. But he uses it as a drum. And in Japan, this is called the kintama, which is translated as golden ball. So they're put outside the bars because golden balls, it's a sign of, it's like good luck. You'll make lots of gold. So a lot of times you see these tanuki things, tanuki statues outside of bars. And like I said, the tanuki are tricksters. Sometimes they're very evil. There's one story where the tanuki went over to a farmer and his wife. He killed the farmer's wife and took the shape of the wife. And when the farmer came home, he made the farmer say, she said, I caught a rabbit today. Here's a rabbit for dinner. And the farmer enjoyed eating the rabbit, not knowing that that was really his wife he was eating. So they can be very, very evil. But as a whole, the tanuki tends to be more mischievous, or more like a trickster than evil. But that's one instance in which the tanuki was very evil. Anyways, tanuki, they're also fun to draw. There is also a story about the tanuki loves to take the appearance of traveling monks. So a lot of times you see the tanuki dressed in black, and that because he pretends to be a monk, and again causing mischief throughout the roads with travelers. Next, let's see, Tengu. Tengu is another one. The Tengu are mountain spirits. They live in the mountain and they are the guardians of the mountains. There's two kinds of Tengu. This is the long-nosed Tengu, of course. And it's 20 years. And again, oftentimes they're dressed as monks, so they have these yamabushi hats. They're mountain monk hats. And they're known for also their long noses. This is the Tengu. These Tengu, the long-nosed Tengu, are also symbols of fertility because of the nose. And they're also great swordsmen. One of the greatest heroes in Japanese history was called Yoshitsune. He lived during the 12th century during the Genpei Wars. And he was a great swordsman, and he learned his skill by living with the Tengu. And the Tengu imparted some of their swordsmanship to Yoshitsune, and he became one of the, like I said, the greatest of the Japanese heroes. Besides the long-nosed Tengu, there are also the Karasu Tengu, which is, Karasu are crows. And let's see, they also have clothes, they have hands, but they also have wings. And these are smaller than the long-nosed Tengus, but they're also great swordsmen. It's hard to tell, can't you? But anyway, again, they're wonderful swordsmen. The guardians of the forest. So if you're going through the forest, you have got to announce yourself, saying, Tengu, I'm entering the forest. Here is a gift from me to you. Please let me pass through. When the shogun or lords would pass through the forest, then a day before them, a herald would go saying, Lord so-and-so would pass through these forests tomorrow. All Tengu, please leave this area. And that went on to the late 19th century, about, leaving the paths of the forest clear for Tengu. Any questions or any comments or anything? A lot of my presentations rely on audience participation, so if you have any questions about some of these things, yes.
Yeah, actually it was also liking that you have to, if you want to learn the sport in you also have to cut off your hand as a sort of as a gift.
Oh, I never heard that.
Yeah, well, it was in the Sakai Jimbo. I think that as payment.
Oh, no. In that one, he's referring to a story that I wrote called Usagi the Tengu. And actually that was nominated for an award. But because Usagi had lost a sword match, this is when Usagi was very young, he lost a sword match to the Tengu. The Tengu threatened, as my reward, I will cut off your hand. And the Tengu was actually going to do it until Usagi Sensei, his teacher, came along and said, stop, I will fight you. And in return for Usagi's hand. And there was a fight, and the teacher did not actually win. But Usagi intervened, a young Usagi intervened and said, don't kill my teacher. Because of the act of bravery, the Tengu let both of them go. But the Tengu, at that Tengu also had just one hand. And there was Usagi thought, well, Usagi, my teacher had fought the Tengu before. I wonder if my teacher had cut off the Tengu's hand in the first place. So there's another story that further on down the line. But a lot of mythology, talk about Usagi Yojimbo, my character Usagi Yojimbo has been going on for 26 years. And a lot of the mythology of Japan is in Usagi. When I first started Usagi, I wasn't sure whether to make a purely fantasy stories with Japanese monsters and goblins and such, or just strictly historical. I chose a combination of both. There's monsters and everything. However, there's things in Japanese history that occur in Usagi. So I kind of combined both of them. You had a question back there, or someone did? No? Okay, let's go on. Did I get Now, Japan has really horrific monsters, things that rip your guts out and everything. They also have some of the goofiest monsters that you have ever seen.
Umbrella.
This is fun, by the way. This is an umbrella. And it's called the karakase. Kasa means umbrella. And there's a legend or a thought in Japanese history that says that when an inanimate object like an umbrella or a teapot or shoes or radios or whatever reaches 100 years old or 99 years old, they become alive. And so they have this tradition. What's it called? It's called Tsukumogami, which is animated things. And they have the umbrella. You probably saw the umbrellas a lot. Another one is the lanterns, Japanese lanterns. And they take on a life of their own. And that's why you don't see many second-hand shops in Japan. You don't, because you never know how old these things are. You can buy a pair of pants that might be 99 years old or 98 years old, and a year later you'll start biting your crotch. And it's so you won't see a second-hand shop or used shops in Japan, because there's always a danger that they'll come alive and overrun your house. Things like teapots and things. So I love it. It's really neat. I love second-hand shops, but the thing is, there are second-hand shops. We have gone to some white sales in California, where I live, at Buddhist temples and things, and they have the greatest stuff. I mean, I found a huge hand-tinted photograph from the what must be from the 1800s or something, and sake cups, those wooden sake cups you're talking about. I have a set of those, and I would love to have gone to second-hand shops in Japan, because they must have the greatest things, but they just don't have them anymore. One of the funniest things are these teapots. It's like, and here's the book. I was asked to do this panel because I did a book called Yokai, and this is published in the U.S. It's already picked up by some of my foreign publishers, but it's a fully painted graphic novel, and I did this in watercolors, and no computers or anything, even hand lettering, done drawn in watercolors. I'll pass this around, and it takes place around something called the night parade of 100 demons. It's believed that once a year, during the hottest night of the year in summer, all the demons, all the yokai would parade through the countryside. And if you look at them, you could become seriously injured, or you could even die. And the story here is that once every 100 years, the the yokai might be able to come into this world permanently, but they need a human soul. And so they kidnap a little girl, and it's Usagi's job to go into the forest and rescue her. But then he has to fight all these monsters and demons and things. So that's the story behind Yokai. And incidentally, this book was dedicated to this man here. And I'll pass this around. You can take a look at it. I actually have a few copies for sale if you're interested. Yes?
I have one more question. You said that for your graphic novels you decided to mix the more mythological elements and historic events.
Yes.
How much are they intertwined in Japanese history at all? I mean, you know...
They are one and the same.
They are one and the same. So if I hear stories about the famous swordsmiths, Masamune and Muramasa, it's going to be to have mythological elements as well.
Not all of them, but many of them will have mythological elements in them. Such as Yoshitsune. Yoshitsune lived during the 12th century. And I mean, it's a fact. He did exist, but then there also is the story of him being taught swordsmanship by the Tengu of the mountains, and they can specifically tell you which mountain, where he had his training and everything. So everything is intertwined in Japanese history as far as mythology and actual history. Yes?
Good question. Yeah, I mean, so as far as the actual spirits, like those ones there, and also the Tengu, what are their kind of motivations? Now, they're just mysterious because they can be evil, they can be good. Are they? I mean, how are they generally regarded? Are they sort of regarded as evil creatures, or are
well, they're both. There's actually some creatures in Japanese mythology that are very beneficial. You want to have them around. There's one monster that cleans your bathtub. he'll lick your bathtub clean. And when you take a shower, take a bath, you might need some soapstone. But even around the bathhouses, in Japan you wash off first. You clean your body first, and then you go into the furo. But of course, after years and years, there's some buildup around the furo, and you want this. And this guy comes in and licks your furo very clean, so it's sanitized. At least that's what they tell their customers. Okay. Another beneficial person I want to have around is a little girl called the Sashiki Wadashi. And she's like a good luck spirit. And she's really dressed as, in the traditional kimono of Japan. And one thing about the kimono is always folded left over right. Because you never fold it the other way unless you're dead. Everyone would be left-handed and the kimono would be folded the other way. And that always bothered me. Traditionally, it's always left over right. And for the Sashiki Wadashi, you never really see her except from the corner of your eye. You see someone running through, and when you turn, she's not there. But once in a while, you see this little girl running around the house. And she is a symbol of good luck. So some yokai are good. There's one story where a farmer met, there was a famous or a very wealthy merchant lives in this town. And one day a farmer came across a girl and says, he told her, I've never seen you before. Where are you from? He said, well, I'm from this town, but I don't know you. And then, but where are you going now? And she said, I'm going to live with this other merchant in the next town. And the very next year, the merchant died, all his family died, but the other merchant in the other town became very prosperous, and they think she was a wadashi. But so some yokai are very beneficial. Most, though, however, are either very mischievous or very evil. Yes?
Is there a mythological background for the cat with the coin that is used in taverns in Milan?
Oh, the beckoning cat, they call it. Yes, it's a good luck. It brings in wealth, and a lot of shops have this little white cat. Usually it's white with this paw. It's beckoning cat. It's called. I forgot what the Japanese name is, but yeah. Maneki Niko, yes, Maneki. Since we're on the subject of cats, oh, I'll do it here. There's also the Obake Neko. Now, in Japanese culture, if you go to Japan, you might see cats with their tails cut off. And it's a legend that if you let the cat's tail grow too long, over time it will become possessed by evil. And they don't tell you how long it is. It could be 1 year, it could be 10 years. But eventually, the cat will become evil unless you cut off its tail. So a lot of times you see cats with very short tails in Japan. Actually, when we were there in Japan in December, we went through a cemetery, and there were a few cats with little stubby tails, and they still do have that practice. Eventually, and the way you know that the cat's possessed is that a second tail will start growing out. So if you have a cat with 2 tails, watch out. And like I said, this could be prevented by cutting off the tail, especially if you're mean to your cat, or you abuse the master, the cat's master. He will come after you. Yes.
In some stories, you see a cat character getting angry and the tail split in two.
Yes, that's what happens, yes. Another thing is that the Obake Neko is a cat goblin. If you abuse his master or kill the cat, he'll come back and he'll get you. That's another thing about the cat. So cut off the cat's tail and you're home safe. He stays a regular cat. Questions? Any questions? No? Yes?
So, are the yokai considered kami in the sense of Shinto, or is it specific cases? Or?
In Japanese culture, Shinto and Buddhism have pretty much intermingled. They're very close. They are separate, but they coexist. Actually, some people worship both the Shinto gods as well as the Buddhist deities in Japan. So they're very accepting. And, Shinto is the traditional religion of Japan. And Buddhism came in much later, but still, they revere both religions almost equally. Yes, any?
There's one, I'm trying to recall the name. It's basically a large square block of stone with iron.
Oh, yes, that is I had that in Usagi. What's it called? No, I know what. It starts with N. Yeah. Nurikabe. Nurikabe. And basically, it's a wall. And it'll block you wherever you go. If you're in the forest and suddenly there's a wall in front of you, and so you go this way, and suddenly the wall's there in front of you again. You turn around, and it's there. That is a nurikabe. And basically, it's a wall that blocks you from going anywhere. The way to get away from it is to kick its feet. It has very sensitive feet. If you try to kick its feet, suddenly the wall will disappear. And so it's really easy to get away from this. But if it's squatting down so you can't see its feet, then you're in trouble. because once in a while it will just squat down and there's no feet. Anything else? Any other? Yes.
What is the reason for it blocking your way? Is that
It's just a nuisance. So many of Japanese yokai, they're just there. They serve no. They're not evil. They're not after you. They don't want money. They don't want anything. They're just there as a nuisance, and that's part of the kabe. He's just there. Another thing, yeah, there's so many monsters and things, such as the Rokubi. The literally translates as 6-foot neck.
That's right.
And it's a woman, but she has a very long neck. And this is a yokai. She's but this is her superpower. She has a long neck. She doesn't do anything. When you see her, be very afraid. I don't know why. In Japanese culture, she's always in those Japanese like 100 monster movies or something. People are afraid of her, but all she does is look around corners. That's about all she does. It's the same with the umbrella. They're just there. And let's see, there's other things. Some are very mean though, such as the Nukekubi. There's Rokukubi and there's Nukekubi. Nukekubi are basically Nukekubi are cut heads. They're floating heads. They during the day they look normal. Their heads are attached to their bodies, but at night their heads can fly off, and they are cannibals. They will eat people. Where the food goes, I don't know. They are cannibals. There's one great story where a priest goes into a home. He's making a pilgrimage. And night is falling, so he goes into her home and says, "May I spend the night here?" And they said, "Sure, of course." And there's 6 of them in the home. He wakes up in the middle of the night, and he feels like there's something around him, but he can't find the owner of the house. So he takes a walk out into the woods, and there he finds 6 bodies, just 6 bodies laying on the floor without heads. So he's worried. He goes outside and he sees the heads floating around, talking about how should we eat the priest? Should we cook him? I don't know. Should we, make tempura or sushi or whatever? And they're all arguing about this. And so this gives the priest time to go back to the house. He grabs the bodies. He hides the bodies. And the thing with the Nukekubi is that when the sun rises, they have to be attached to their head. Their heads have to be attached to their bodies, or they will die. They're like vampires. Vampires have to be back in the coffin before nightfall, or they'll die. The same with the Nukekubi. And the way you can tell a Nukekubi is that he has Buddhist writings along his neck, but many of them wear scarves, and so it's difficult to tell. But anyway, this priest hides, and when the sun rises, meanwhile the heads are looking all over the place for him, and the sun rises, the heads fall dead. And he grabs one of the Nukekubi and he ties it to his belt there. He continues on his pilgrimage, and he's arrested because you have a head, the guy's head. No, it's not the guy's head. You're mistaken. This is a Nukekubi. And he shows him, yes, the head's cut off, but there's no cut mark. It was just solid skin. So the police said, "Okay, you're on your way." It happens. Oh, in Japan, the laws are much more flexible. Questions? Any things that you have heard of? If not, yes.
Yeah, I've heard of the hungry ghosts. Gaki, is it? I don't know much about. Well, I've heard of the name, and I vaguely know what they are. But do you know any more?
Gaki are, like you said, they're hungry ghosts. If a person dies with revenge on his mind, like if he's dying with some crime that has not been cleared or something, he will come back as what's called a hungry ghost. And in Japanese, I had my glasses.
They're in your hands.
There they are. Someone hid them. Now, Japanese ghosts usually have these white things on the top of their heads, the triangles. I don't know why. And stringy hair. And they're always wearing white. And they look like Mr. Burns, actually.
White is the funerary color.
Yes. And many Japanese ghosts do not have feet. But traditionally, the gaki pretty much looks like this. They have this white triangle cloth on their heads. I think it's a Buddhist thing. I'm not exactly sure. But typically, they do not also have feet. And they come back to avenge themselves or right some kind of wrong. And, there's been stories where they would haunt their, wives would haunt their husbands for killing them or for marrying someone else or things like that. So that's the gaki. Someone else had a question? Yes.
Yeah, I heard about some variants of Nezumis, especially normal rats with just one eye at the top of their head, and they are multiplying if you hit them, and some strange other things like that. And if you hit them, they multiply, and there are have a Nezumi master above them who controls them, and some strange stuff.
Rodaigo, yes.
Yeah.
Rodaigo was a priest. Like I said, Rodaigo was a Buddhist priest, and the lord of the area came up to Rodaigo and said, if you pray, my wife is going to have a baby. If he is please pray that he is a son. And if I do have a son, I will give you great rewards. I will expand your temple, and you will be famous throughout the land. The wife did have a son, but the priest at the other temple said, it was my prayers that actually gave you a son. Rodaigo had nothing to do with it. And so the Lord believed him, and so Rodaigo got nothing. And so, as a protest, Rodaigo had a hunger fast. He would not eat and then he died. But after he died, he was reincarnated as a giant rat, and as a master of rats. And he sent his rat hordes out to the rival temple, his enemy temple, and all the rats ate up all the Buddhist writings, the sutras. And finally, the Lord dug a great pit and lured Rodaigo and all the rats into the pit. And once they were in the pit, they'd fill it up again, so they were all buried alive. So that's the story of Rodaigo and his rat minions, his evil creatures of the night. Is that it? No?
Not really. That's also an interesting story.
Yeah, that's a story that I know about the rat catcher. I have a story in there by Yokai called Sancho, a character called Sancho. Basically, it's a foot with a giant eye and hair. And that's all he does. But I love the design. It's a foot with an eye. How cool is that? So I wanted to use that character, but I had no idea what Sancho was about. So I sent a posting on the internet saying, what is this character? Tell me about him. And I had received an email from a person in Japan named Matt Alt, who wrote to me and says, my name is Matt Alt. I just wrote a book called Yokai Attacks. And he told me about the character of Sancho. This is not actually originally a Japanese yokai. It came by way of China. And the story is a Buddhist priest was walking, Buddhist priests go everywhere. A Buddhist priest was walking through the forest, and he knew there were tigers in the woods. So he slept in a tree. And in the middle of the night, a snake came down, and the Buddhist priest said, go away, snake. And the snake went away. And that story came to Japan for some reason. They thought it was very exciting. There's a wonderful story. Except the snake was not interesting enough. So they turned it into a foot with an eyeball. And that's how the Sancho came to Japan. Yeah, and Matt asked me, my book is called Yokai Attacks. Would you like me to send you a copy? And I wrote back, no, I already have your book. That was very nice. And we've corresponded since then. When I went to Japan in December, we got together with Matt and a few manga artists. They took us out to a great Okinawan restaurant. I had never had Okinawan food before. It was wonderful. It's very different from Japanese cuisine. Similar but different. And Matt has just written a book called something about the history of ninja. This is the real history of ninja. And I wrote a blurb for his new book. So that was very nice. So we made this very nice connection through the internet and through our lovely Yokai. And Matt, turns out he's not only a journalist and a writer, but he's also in TV series and things. So yeah, we're watching a series called Tokyo Eye. And oh, you love Matt. He did a tour of the best drinking spots in Japan.
He published it?
No, it was on TV. He's a correspondent for a TV series called Tokyo Eye. It's the best, like a travelogue of Tokyo you'd ever seen, and Matt's one of them. He also did one on a yokai tour of Tokyo. And I talked about the kappa earlier. There's one temple in Tokyo that's dedicated to the kappa. And they actually have a kappa finger as part of their artifacts. And you can actually, for a little donation, you can go to the temple and actually see a kappa finger. And it looks like a strange human figure, but that's a kappa finger. It's in the temple, so it's true. Yes, it's a woman that has no face. I can't remember what it's called. Something onna. But if you look in the mirror, once in a while you see a reflection coming at you, but it has no face. And people would go to the women's restroom just out of scientific curiosity, to look for this woman with no face. And I personally did not see her. Of course, when I go into the women's restroom, I avert my eyes. So, but the Wildlife Drive-In has since been torn down, so she disappeared along with it. Another one, since there's a lot of fox avatars in here. Probably one of the kitsune. Yes, kitsune. Kitsune is basically the fox spirit. But the kitsune is also a shapeshifter. It can change into different shapes. And the kitsune is a trickster. One of its famous tricks is to turn into a woman, to lure men to their deaths or into their evil clutches. And the legend is when a fox reaches 1,000 years of age, it grows 9 tails for you. It grows 9 tails and turns golden. And the fox is mischievous, or not evil, but it's very mischievous. But it's also a messenger of the god Inari. Inari is the god of fields and rice and fertility. So it's a very important god. Rice, of course, is probably the main staple of Japanese meals. And there's even a sushi named after the Inari sushi, named after the fox god, or the god of the fields. And there are many temples dedicated to the god Inari. And when you go to those temples, you often see, well, not often, but oftentimes you see the fox, and they would have usually a red bib. And you see lots of images, usually statues of the fox around Inari temples. And we went to Inari Temple in Tokyo, right by the huge fish market there. And yeah, you can see lots of them. And the neatest thing is, people would leave these little toys, Inari fox figures around. So this temple had lots of these little figures on. So that was kind of cute. Not only those old stone ones, but also the little plastic, things that you find in cheap little souvenir stands. So it was really cool.
That would be a great way to convince somebody to give you some more.
Yeah.
Well, actually, they temple get a life of their own. They get a connection to the user, and if it's the wrong person reading this word, it won't work well. But I think it's different from the yokai.
This is tofu kozo. Tofu, do you know what tofu is?
Yes.
Tofu is bean curd. It's yogurt made from soybeans. And tofu kozu will offer you tofu. Kozu means boy. It's a little child with a tray of tofu, and it has a maple leaf on it. Don't eat it. Because once you eat it, spores will start to grow inside of you, and leaves and soon vines and tentacles will start coming out of your nose and everything. So do not eat tofu kozu's tofu. But he's very angelic. He's always smiling, and he'll offer it very politely, but do not eat it. The evil creatures that we have in the West. And they bring the rains. A lot of times you see the dragon with a giant ball in his mouth, the dragon pearl. And dragons are worshipped as good creatures. I talked about good creatures, dragons are one of them. Yes?
What is a Japanese ogre? I mean, we
Japanese
have
ogre,
but it's quite different.
They're called oni. And they come in various colors, but let's see. They sometimes have one horn or two horns. And they can come in like pink, green, blue, and a lot of times they'll have these big clubs. And loincloths. Belly button there. One of the famous Oni stories, like I said, Japanese mythology, ogres are called Oni. I did a story for Marvel Comics, and Marvel had asked me to do a story, and they said I could use any character they have, and I could do anything I wanted with them. I chose a Hulk. I said I want to do some of that Hulk, and I'm going to kill him at the end. The story is called Oni because the Hulk, the big green monster, would be regarded as an Oni in Japan. But the most famous Oni story is the story of Momotaro, Peach Boy. An old farmer and his wife want a son or a child, but they can't have one. So one day, while the wife is washing her clothes at the side of the river, a giant peach comes by. She grabs it from the water and says, "Oh, this would be a perfect meal for my husband." When he comes home, they cut it open, and inside is a small child. So they raise it as their own. And when the child comes of age, there's a plague of oni, of ogres around the area, and they're kidnapping people, princesses and things, usually princesses, and they're taking them to their island along with all the treasures. So Momotaro, which literally means peach boy, says, I'm going to rescue them. He goes, the first thing the mother makes some thing called Nippon Ichi no Kibidango, which is little pastries, rice cake pastries. And as he's going, he meets a dog, and the dog says, oh, I see you have some Nippon Ichi no Kibidango. Give one to me. Well, I can't give you a whole one, but I'll share one with you. So the dog has bits of his Kibidango and says, oh, let me join you. So both of them are walking along, and then they meet a monkey. And the monkey says, I see you have some Nippon Ichi no Kibidango. If you give one to me, I will join you. Well, I can't give you a whole one, but we'll share one with you. So the monkey joins them. Along comes a pheasant, says, I see you have some Nippon Ichi no Kibidango. And of course he joins them, it comes along with them. And they come to the ocean, and they find a boat, and they cross the ocean to the island of the Oni. And then they attack the Oni. The pheasant goes over the walls of the castle, and the monkey scurries over the walls. And while the pheasant is poking the eyes out of the monsters, the monkey opens up the door, and the Momotaro and the dog storm the castle. They kill all the Oni except for the head Oni, who breaks his horn, thereby losing his power. And he says, I will grant you any wish. Of course, Momotaro says, give back all the gold you stole and give me the princess. And so Momotaro and the princess get married. But that's the story of Momotaro and the ogres. That's probably the most famous Oni story in Japanese folklore.